let's go to question number 2. Question number 2 is something that, again, people mention and ask, and it's a valid question. I get it. And here's the question. Based on the expense of all this hardware, console and hardware, couldn't you just achieve the same thing with plugins? Or could you get close enough? Do you really need all this stuff? Well, there are needs and there's wants. You don't need any of this. It's no different than you really don't need any plugins beyond your stock plugins that come with your DAW. You don't need that to make good music. You don't need that to make something that sounds really great. You don't. I've been saying that for years and I'll continue to say that. What you need to make good sounding music in your home studio is very minimal. You need a recording software, and I don't care which one you use because they're all the same. They all have different workflows. They all sound the same. They do. Pick one. Pro Tools, Logic, Reaper, Studio One, Cubase, Luna, whatever other one that you find, they're all the same. You can make great music with that. And by the way, you don't need to buy a single plugin beyond what comes with that recording software to make good music. You don't. I'm not claiming that you do. You don't, right? But why do people buy third-party plugins? Because they want something that sounds a little different than their stock plugins. And again, different. I didn't say better. I said different, right? They sound different. They do. There's no denying that. Okay? Same thing with analog. Can you get close to plugins? Yeah. Or can plugins get close to analog? It gets close. Is it the same? Not by a long shot. Does it sound the same? No, it doesn't. It sounds very different. Again, I didn't say better because that's subjective. What's better to you may not be better to me and vice versa. And your point is valid and my point is valid. It's different. It's way different. Sounds way different. And if you ever worked with this stuff for real, not listen to what someone told you on YouTube, even guys like me, but actually got in the room and worked on the stuff, you would realize that it's different. It is. No matter whether it's an SSL, an Eve, an API, no matter whether it's LA2As, 1176s, Pultec EQs, doesn't matter. Analog sounds different than plugins. It's way different. Okay? So can you achieve the same thing with plugins? No, not the same thing. But you can achieve something that sounds good with plugins. But that's not why I bought this, as I said in the first question. I will tell you that it takes way longer to get to the final mix with plugins than it does with analog. I can tell you that for sure. Even if with all the templates and everything that you can set up, it takes longer. Working in this workflow is much faster for me and for a lot of other people. That's not the reason to go out and buy it necessarily, but that is a fact. And the workflow is completely different. It's completely different from the physical obvious, right? It's way different than working with plugins. It's not just the sound, it's way different physically, okay? And so the analogy that I kind of make, and again, as I said earlier, I love both workflows. I use them every day. But what are the differences? Other than, wow, look at all this great stuff and you can put your hands on things, tactile, way different. Working on in the box with plugins with a mouse and a keyboard or a trackball or a trackpad, to me, feels a little bit more like working on a spreadsheet where you're looking at, you're squinting at the screen, you got to open up all your plugin windows and you can only typically adjust one thing at a time. That is a way, way different experience than working with this stuff. When you work with a console, when you work with gear, when you put your hands on stuff, it's an instrument in and of itself, to me. It feels like you're more part of the music, you're more part of the experience. It's a way different experience. So again, can you get to the same sound with plugins? You can get close, but it's not the same. It is different. And that's okay, but that's what it is. And then the other thing that I say to people, because they say, wow, all this expense, if you can get close enough, why would you spend all this money, even if it's just a little different, right? It's a little different. Is it worth all this money? Well, again, I bring it back to experience. Now, again, this is only my personal opinion. It's not the end-all be-all. It's my honest opinion for someone asking me this question. I kind of, again, I love analogies. I kind of say, I hear what you're saying, but Why do some people drive a BMW or a Mercedes or a car that costs $50, $60, $70, $80,000, Cadillac Escalade, whatever you want to call it, right? Why do some people drive expensive cars? Couldn't you just buy a car that was half the price or 1/3 the price? You could buy a Toyota Corolla, Honda Civic, or whatever. I'm not making fun of anybody's car. You could buy a car for 25 grand, you know, or a used car. Why would you buy a BMW or a Mercedes? They're both cars, right? They both have power windows. They both probably have comfortable seating. They both probably have, you know, radios. Why would you buy one over the other? Right? The more expensive cars can have more bells and whistles, certainly, but don't those cars both get you from point A to point B? Right? What's the difference if you drive a $25,000 car or a $75,000 car? It's the experience. Someone that buys a BMW or a Mercedes or a high-end vehicle, one, because they can, it's what they like, and they like the experience and the way it makes them feel when they drive that car. It doesn't mean you couldn't get there with the car that was 1/3 the price or half the price or whatever number you want to put on it, but it's a different experience, a way different experience, right? But let's bring it back to music for a second. Why do people play? I'm a guitar player, right? A lot of you probably guitar players. Why does a guitar player buy a $4,000 PRS, USA-made PRS, or a $3,000 Les Paul, or a vintage guitar, right? Like 59 reissue Les Pauls, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 guitars. I know people that have 4 or 5 of those. Some of you might. And they also have 3 or 4 different boutique amps at $2 grand a piece. It very quickly, right? You have 3 or 4 guitars at $3, $4 grand each. You're at 10, 12,000. Throw another $8,000 or $10,000 in a handful of really nice amplifiers, and then they got a treasure chest full of guitar pedals, right? A few thousand, but you know what I mean? You get to 50 grand pretty quick. Why do people do that? Why not just buy a $400 Epiphone Les Paul? Why buy a $3,000 Les Paul? Now you could say one's made better than the other. That's true. But if you swap out the pickups and put the same kind of pickups in there and the same gauge strings and you set it up properly, wouldn't it play and sound great? Of course it would. But why do people buy more expensive items? Because they can and they like the experience. And maybe it's a reward to themselves for all their life's hard work. Who knows? So again, for me, can you get close enough with plugins? Is it worth the expense? Well, that's different for you, for me, right? Everybody's level is different, right? This may be completely obnoxiously too expensive and a waste of money to you. Valid, I respect that, right? That's totally cool. But those are the reasons, right? Right? You can get to this, you can get close enough for some people, but the sound is way different. The physical workflow and the experience is way different than working in the box. And unless you've done it, you don't know, right? And some people want that experience. Like I said earlier, I wanted the experience. I wanted to know, what is it like? And I got to tell you, I love it way more than working in the box. It's just more fun for me. So that's the reason, okay? So that answers question number 2. Okay, a couple of more questions and then we'll head out of there. Hopefully this is helping somebody.